Well, welcome again to our debrief. This morning we have Kyle Wetzler. He was the teaching pastor today, but his typical job is pastor of spiritual formations and exec over the team, so he does a great job for us. And right next to me, John Siebert, our campus pastor of Battlegrounds, and we are so glad to be together once again. I'll be leading the discussion today. Michael's not with us this morning, but I wanted to start off with a light question for you guys. What was your first job? Roll back the time. What year was it and what job was it?
Go ahead.
Year, I'm not certain, but the place is no longer in business anymore. But I went there for a very specific reason to get a discount. And then I realized I had to work a certain time to get that discount. And I didn't work there long enough. Circuit City, baby.
Circuit City.
I remember my first manager, and I have some words for him if I ever ran into him again.
What was the outfit? What did you have to wear?
It was like a red polo, and I think they gave me somebody else's. It was like gross, yeah. And then there's pit stains, definitely. And then like khaki pants and like dress shoes. And I was in computers, printers. This is back in the day because there were still camcorders. Camcorders and just digital cameras. So
Wow. John, what about you?
I've worked a lot of jobs growing up, but I think the first one where I officially got a paycheck was at Hawkinson Market. I was the stock boy there, just down the road. And
What'd you wear? I'm trying to imagine what that would look like.
why are you asking about wardrobe?
There's not a uniform, but you were in stocking the coolers a lot, so I would wear like an army jacket.
Was it like one of those deep freezers where you go in?
It's very cold, yeah.
And like you breathe in through your nose and everything just freezes up?
It's very the coolers. I don't think Jim will let you do this anymore, but if it gets hot, sometimes we'd sneak and hide in the coolers on hot days. I'm pretty sure that's not allowed anymore.
Was it even really allowed back then?
Maybe not. Sorry. You can't fire me though, because I don't work there.
My first job was I mowed lawns, and my mom, she had this lawn mowing business, and she loved geese and purple. And so she talked my dad into buying this old trailer and painting it white, but then stenciling on. Remember the geese that was in like everybody's mom's kitchen, all the decor, purple geese and flowers on this trailer. And so it was being pulled behind our old Mercury station wagon. So it was the coolest job.
Oh, I'm sure your friends all thought that was super
pulling
cool.
It. Oh yeah.
We had to answer our wardrobe. What was your outfit for that?
Shoes. Lawn mowing shoes with the green tread, you know what I'm talking about?
Old New Balance.
No, probably not. Probably like Voigt. Shame.
LA Knights.
Well, we're going to dive in to talk about Ecclesiastes today. Kyle, you focused on chapter 4 and then into 5 as well, and covered a lot of ground. Today I want to start by asking you about verse 4, which talks about the kind of the mentality behind working, where it pulls out the idea that some people are driven by envy and jealousy. And then in the same verse, it actually talks about how a fool will just simply fold his hands. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of just want to throw it out there. The preacher or the teacher in the text kind of puts both these in front of everybody. How do you guys personally wrestle with that drive, but also that desire not to just be a fool who folds their hands, that balance?
It's funny. I've been thinking a lot about just busyness lately, because Corona has got most of our activities that we typically do in the summertime are kind of furloughed. I don't think the problem for most men is laziness. I think it's overwork and learning to rest well is the real challenge for most men. Of a given age, I think young men, they need a little more gas and a little less brake, and older men need a little more brake and a little less gas. And so I've been thinking a lot about that personally. I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely.
What makes it hard to think through is, so when this was written, there wasn't necessarily electricity where I could work 24 hours a day, right, wherever I want, whenever I want. And so there's that striving that, if we were if the sun was our only ability to work in daylight, that would limit our time. So even within that, there's people who are exerting themselves past that. But for us, depending on your job, your email gets pinged at all hours of the day, all hours of the night. So how do we set up healthy boundaries to where like you said, there needs to be a little bit more break where there's Sabbath, where can I spend a day, if we're thinking about God's creation, how he commanded and called people to subdue the earth, and he set the example on the seventh day he rested. If we can't even do that very first thing of giving us one day of rest ourselves, allowing ourselves to do that, there's something out of balance there. And then even if you just think about how America is structured, the 5-day work week, so we're actually lucky we get 2 days of rest technically, depending on the field we're in. Most of us can't even do that. So I think what you're saying, do I need to put more gas or brake in my life, might be a really good place to start.
Right.
That's really interesting to think about, just the natural rhythms that kind of God intended. Obviously, God knew that there was going to be an invention of electricity that would kind of push against some of his natural rhythms and cycles. But I think the more I have been self-controlled enough as I'm getting older, like you're talking about, like having to find the break and realizing that I'm not a machine.
Right.
That yes, I can plug my iPhone in and continuously work on it, but that's not how bodies work.
Yeah.
And so the more I find myself tuning into those natural rhythms, whether that be Sabbath, which is what I'm trying to do these days, once a week resting, I find more and more that balance, because you can work hard but also rest. I want to move on to verse 13 that talks about a king. Kyle, give us a reshot or a repicture of what that king is. And at one point he stops listening. The question is this: how in your life, each of you guys have worked hard, and God has really anointed each one of you to be leaders. What practices have you built into your life to make sure that you don't get to be like this guy who shuts off and forgets to welcome outside influence?
Aging's hard, and I've been having conversations with some older retired pastors, and there's this idea of I'm no longer needed. And I would just say to that group, if you find yourself in that group, we need what you have to offer. And then I think for younger people, which I fall somewhere in between, we need to listen to their voice as well and ask them, draw them out, because there's this, I think just internally as men age, there's this idea that I'm no longer valid because I'm not working, or no longer needed, my skill set. And we need that more now, because you have more disposable time, income, and experience than you've ever had in your entire life. And unfortunately, men just kind of pull the ripcord and disappear from contributing. And, not to say getting a home in Arizona is a bad thing, but I can't tell you how many men I've respected as leaders who've just disappeared because they think they're no longer needed. We need that. And I think just discipline ourselves to ask the questions and, for lack of a better word, sit at the feet of someone who's been through it and has the t-shirt, because we don't have that experience and they do, but that just takes humility on both sides.
Yeah. Well, because it's like an awkward dance, honestly, to have that, to forge that relationship. Because I know that there's men and women too in our church that would love somebody older to invest in and pour into them. But it's hard to make that connection of how do you, I would love an older man to be put their arm around me hey, keep your head up, kid. The kids won't always be this young. You won't always be this tired. Ministry won't always be this difficult. Actually, it is. So keep your head up. So I think there's a humility that is needed on both ends. But that old man didn't get there overnight. He made cognitive decisions all throughout his life to begin to isolate and cut people out of his life. I guess I'm pulling that out of the text a little bit. But so I think, how can I continually put myself in a position of sitting underneath somebody, listening to somebody, whether they're on a couch with me or if somebody's teaching at a conference somewhere, or even just in passing somehow. How can I always just remind myself that God's not done with me yet by his grace, and he's going to use his people and other people to do that work in me. So how do I keep at least an open posture towards that?
I think the key is the guys I see and gals that I see aging well they remain teachable and they're lifelong learners. Yeah. They want to, and they're also they don't find themselves in an echo chamber where they're only consuming things that validate their own experience or worldview. They're asking questions and leaning in and reading books. And I think if that's the posture you have, that you'll find yourself in a pretty healthy place.
Yeah, you're both touching on how challenging it is because it's a vulnerable relationship.
Yeah.
Many young guys, myself included, at different moments, it's been difficult to be in a world of professionals and in a world of mastery because, particularly with our work, we have people who are teaching on the same passage all around the world who have had massively different amount of times working on what we do, and so there's this expectation that I either place on myself or we put on ourselves that we need to have the answers. And so it's difficult for us to have that humility to go, man, there's something, it's okay for me not to have the answers and to look for somebody to process with. How do you guys identify guys? You know, and females?
I sit with a guy once a month. His name is Mike White. He might be listening to this. He's
Hi, Mike.
Retired pastor. And I'm looking for someone in the community, and Mike fit this profile, who has a good reputation and has walked a long time in the same direction, long obedience in the same direction, in the words of Eugene Peterson. That's what I'm looking for when I'm looking for a mentor. And so guys that fit that profile, who have a good reputation and who have faithfully served.
What about for you?
I think some of the hardest words men can say is "I was wrong, I'm sorry." So I usually try and look for men who say those words because that's going to elicit the same response out of me because I know how hard it is for me to say that. So people who that have a good confidence and understanding of who God's created them and made them to be, and also knowing their shortcomings and faults and failures, and are willing not to like be cavalier about it, but at least acknowledge them and say, this is where I have failed, this is where I've messed up, but this is where God's grace have met it, or has met me in it. So I think, if I hear somebody say that, man, I want to run alongside you and run through a wall with you. But somebody who never says those words or never acknowledges those things, they're really hard to be around. But I think they'll end up being like that foolish king to never admit wrong or fault or failure. So.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of sum up, because some of you guys are listening out there and you're like, I don't know who I should pick, or I don't know how to even start the conversation. What I'm hearing you guys say is you're wanting someone who is consistently moving and growing and aware of those around them. Even though they've walked through things, they're not just looking one direction. They're actually looking behind themselves and going, who can I take with me in this? Right?
I was one of my friends, he's a preacher on the East Coast, and he was talking about how he was at this conference and he was having breakfast with John Piper. And he asked this question, hey, I noticed on your website you don't have anything on Ecclesiastes or Song of Solomon. And Piper said, oh yeah, I'm going to be doing that next. And he's like, so what are you writing on right now? And the guy said, oh, I'm doing Ecclesiastes right now. Piper stops the conversation. He's like, teach me Ecclesiastes. Like, of all people in the world, again, John Piper, people who love and respect and read his books, is asking this younger pastor, okay, teach me Ecclesiastes. That dude's like smarter than all of us combined and then some.
Right.
For him to have that piqued interest.
Yeah. Even that, like a mentor doesn't have to be someone older than you with more gray hair. I know younger men than me who have more wisdom than me, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's probably more awkward to be the younger and to have somebody going, hey, you know what I mean? And for you to go, okay, Lord, you need to give me the ability to shepherd this person. But for me, I'm looking for people who have similar scars to me and have scars that are healed well. Does that make sense? Where they've walked through something that I need to know how they survived it. Yeah. And they're like, here's how God brought me through that. And here's how hard it's going to be, but here's the faithfulness of God. And the last thing I'll just add is one mentor isn't enough. I have 5-6 mentors, usually having to do with different areas of life. And so don't have too high of expectations for your mentors, because nobody is the complete package. Only Jesus is that, who is the great mentor of us all. We need to move along. I want to jump into verse 9. Verse 9 talks about community and the value of community and how it can be a toil, a work to establish community, but there can be a reward for that. My question for you guys is, how have you seen in life community that's worth fighting for, that it's been redemptive rather than something that's just taken from you, it's given to you?
It's funny that's the question, because I was thinking about this on Monday. I was visiting with a woman who is at home on hospice, and barring a miracle, she's going to meet Jesus very soon. And I asked her, what has been your big takeaway? And she said that. She's like, the community, like the church, like this season's been very hard, but the church and people who love Jesus have lifted me up. And I don't think I could have done it without them, and I just was like, okay, that's something worth fighting for. I mean, I think one of the leading fears is like to die alone. And one of the greatest gifts the church has to offer our community is like you'll have a family, you have a place, people to come alongside you and, arguably the hardest season of your life. So,
wow. Thanks.
I think it's easy for us to get disoriented in life and overwhelmed and overtaxed and overburdened. And sometimes we have a hard time telling up from down, left from right. And it's nice to have somebody who doesn't necessarily, it's nice to have somebody who jumps into the pit with you and says, man, this pit sucks. But then there's a whole other thing for somebody to help pull you out and say, hey, here's up, here's down, here's left, here's right. So just kind of being that reorientation piece, somebody that helps anchor. And so I think even just as you asked that question, I was thinking about conversations that I've had with my life group over the last couple of months, just because things have been so disorienting for so many people. We don't know what school will look like. We don't know what work will look like, our housing situation, our relationships. There's just this constant washing machine and agitation. And it's almost like that one time each week we're able to get on a Zoom call with one another and say, okay, let's cut through the clutter, and what are truths that we can remind ourselves of, and knowing that we're not in this alone. And there's great people in my group that each week we get to remind one another that we're not in it alone. God is still reigning and ruling. We can pray for one another. We can help one another. But at least it's that one touch point where we can kind of cut through the clutter and the disorientation of this world and right size our expectations of things.
That's great. Well, the conversation could go on, I'm sure, but really we want to just end it there with recognizing that we need each other, whether that's a community to work hard at, to be there for each other, or even having a mentor in your life that you can consistently be asking outside input, so that it's not just that echo chamber, but actually we're being enriched by gospel-centered individuals who will continue to point us towards truth for our good as we're being conformed to the image of Jesus together. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to send them in to us. We would love to continue to address the situations you're walking through as we continue to see you come to life in Christ. Have a great day. Thanks, guys.